On Sunday night, we did a Bible study at OB's house, and I was talking to the people about the parable of the sower, and one of the soils. If you could turn to Matthew 13 real quick, one of the soils. Prompted something that brought about what we're going to look at tonight. Matthew 13, verse 20 and 21. It says, "As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but endures for a while. And when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately he falls away." And so I was pointing out that, as I've said before, in these verses, some things are said and some things are not said. Something that is said is that they endured for a while. If you go over to Luke 8 and you look at the parallel, it says that they believed for a while. And what I always point out is that it doesn't tell you how long that they actually believed. It doesn't tell you how long of a while they endured. And, sometimes that gets people kind of nervous because I start pointing out that there are, documented, quote-unquote, famous, atheists and some Muslims and some Catholics who used to be identified as Christians, who used to be pastors and preachers and theologians and the such. They endured for a while, some of them 5 years, some of them 15 years, some even 25, some even 60 years, enduring for a while, and then they fall away. And that's very frightening, because, and I always say, if you would to go to these people in the middle of their profession and tell them that one day you will deny the faith, one day you will deny the very existence of God, they would argue with you and say, absolutely not, under no circumstances, you're out of your mind. This cannot and will not be. And yet, you look at their lives now and you see that very thing happening. But we're told something in this, and that is the determining factor that shows whether or not they are truly in. And that is, when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately they fall away. And I usually only come at it from the angle of the people who said they were in, they went through the persecution, and then they fell away. But as I was preaching it on Sunday and thinking about it on Monday, I said, you know what? There is a good thing about bad times. And that's what we're going to look at tonight. The good thing about that tribulation. Our main text is going to be Romans 5, 3 through 5. It says, "More than that, we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us." And often I would hear to rejoice in suffering, that in all things count it joy. And often I would look at it from the angle of the reality of, you know what, even though I am suffering, I'm not getting it as bad as I deserve to get it. And that's an angle to look at it as, right? I mean, you really think about it. The reality that all people are born with a nature that makes them God-hating, that makes people have desires that go away from God, incurring guilt, that guilt deserves wrath. All people are born this way. All people are born deserving God's wrath. And God, in His kindness and grace, saves some, all who will believe. And the people who God saves suffer still. And so we can look at it from the angle of, okay, even though I'm going through a very difficult time right now, and I'm suffering, and I'm enduring tribulation, as bad as it is, it's not hell. And I can rejoice that even though I'm going through this very difficult and painful situation, I'm not getting what I deserve, which is hell. And there's great comfort in that. And there's great joy to be found in that thought. Meditate upon that. But I found something else that is extremely helpful, and that is that the suffering that we go through proves the genuineness of our faith, which is what is so good about these bad times. I'm going to look at scriptures and see how this is continually talked about and emphasized, and what a great reason to rejoice in our suffering. So looking at this verse, not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. So you have the situation, the opposite situation, like we looked at in Matthew 13. So you have the person who is saying, I want to identify with Christ. If you look at the parable, it says that they immediately receive the word with joy when they hear it. So again, this is the person who, they hear the gospel, they are all ears. They're the person who is just eating it up. They're sitting on the edge of their seat, eyes bulging, tears, joy. They're like, yes, I want to receive this. It's not the person who seems just unaffected. If you've ever gone out and done evangelism, if you talk to people about the Lord, and it's the person who is just, they're asking the questions, it just seems like, man, this is really just going well. Like, praise God for this. Like, this is, they are the kind of person that you want to run into because they're just full of joy and they're receiving everything you're saying about the Lord, and everything just seems so hopeful. Until tribulation comes, until hard times come, and that's when things start getting difficult for them. Perhaps, they lose their job, perhaps a family member dies, perhaps they're struck with some type of terminal illness, perhaps, it also talks about persecution. People start shunning them, family starts cutting them off, things start getting difficult for them. They don't get everything that Joel Osteen and TBN crowd promised them, and it's not health, wealth, and prosperity. In fact, it's actually a cross and suffering. They didn't sign up for this, and so they say, you know what? This is too much for me. I'm going to go back to what I was doing before. However, on the flip side, those who are His, those who are truly the Lord's, we have a similar situation, but the difference comes when the tribulation strikes. You were lost. The gospel was preached to you. You also received it with joy. You also shed tears over your sin. You also saw Christ as a beautiful Savior, and you said, I want Him, and you believed. Then, when tribulation struck, you endured. You said, this is painful. This hurts. This actually is not pleasant. However, I'm holding on to Christ. So when the smoke clears, you're still there. You're still in Him. You have not abandoned ship. You have not thrown Christ overboard as a weight. And so, when the next round of suffering comes, because Jesus promised us, be of good cheer. I mean, in this world you will have trouble. You will have problems. But be of good cheer. I have overcome this world. It's promised. It's promised to those who hear the word and don't do it. When the storms come, those people who are not firmly planted, they're destroyed. When the storms come to those who are firmly planted, they're still there. The storm comes to both. The problems come to both. Suffering comes to both. But for the believer, when the suffering comes, you endure. And then the next round of suffering comes, and you reflect upon the last time you suffered. You reflect upon the last family member who died. You reflect upon the last time you got sick. You reflect upon the last time you lost your job. You reflect upon the last time people mocked you. And you say, I remember that Christ was my treasure then, and He will be my treasure now. And then the next time you go through suffering, again, I remember that Christ is my treasure and I will hold on to Him again. And this is what endurance is. You know, you have the person who says, you know what? I need to be a better steward of this body that God gave me. I'm going to start running. And you're not a runner. So you wake up early in the morning, put your sneakers on, and you start running. And you run for about 5-10 minutes, and you're heaving and breathing, and you're like, okay, this was a good start. And then the next day, you go out there, and you're doing the same thing about 5-10 minutes, and you're heaving and breathing. But if you do that consistently for about a month, you'll find yourself being able to last longer and go further. That's endurance. Endurance is built up after a while, and this is kind of like what Pastor Tim was hitting on Sunday when he just briefly dropped that enormous nugget in our lap when he was talking about when you look at growth, you know, you look at a plant grow, you don't see this, oh, it's a seedling and then it shoots up into a tree. You know, when you see a child, especially if you have children, you don't really see them grow. But if people come, they haven't seen them in a while. That's what always happens when I go home to go visit and I see my nieces and nephews. And I'm like, wow, last time I saw you, you were like here, and now you're here. It's this growth that gradually happens, but it's happening. It's this growth that it is maybe perhaps slowly, but it is growing. And this is what happens when the believer goes through suffering. Like it says, the suffering produces endurance. We can rejoice in the suffering because what believer does not want to be able to endure suffering? It's like, you know, I don't know who said it, but don't pray for a lighter cross, pray for a stronger back. We don't want to have all suffering removed from us. That's not reality. We want to be able to endure the suffering, whatever it be. Whether it is, you know, and I say it for me because I remember being unemployed. If you're a man, especially if you have a wife and children and bills to pay and you do not have a job, that's a true, and you're trying, you're pressing, you're putting in applications, and you're like, this is hard. This is kind of difficult. You want the ability that when that happens, that you can stand firm that, God, you are my provider. You are my all. You are my treasure. I will not forsake you because times are hard. You want to have the blessing of endurance, and that is something to rejoice about. So when suffering comes, if you have this endurance, you can look at suffering and say, you know, not with pride, but bring it on, because I have walked with Christ in such ways, whether it's the losing of a job or the stake in being set on fire. How is it that believers were able to face the flames and the teeth and the sword, the grace of God to them? But we see here that the suffering produces endurance. And endurance produces character. That is character. To be able to persevere, to be able to endure, that is a character, because no matter what happens, I mean, you think about the believer who is in the midst of the fire. There is integrity there, because that is what tests your integrity. It's those difficult times. You think about it. You are faced with a dilemma, and the way out of this dilemma is a lie. If I lie, I'm not going to have to deal with this suffering. If I don't lie, I'm going to suffer. Well, character would say, because I have suffered and I have endured, now I have the character to say, you know what, I'm going to tell the truth even if it means my suffering. Regardless of what comes, I'm going to have the integrity and the character to stand upon the truths of Scripture, because through my suffering, endurance has produced character in me. And now I'm more like Christ. Regardless of what came his way, he stood upon the truth and would not waver. Standing in the face of Pilate, I have the ability to let you free. Character. And character produces hope, because you can see, again, like the illustration of the person who's running. If you start out that first day and you like, you know what, this first day I didn't do too well, you give up. There's no hope in that. But if you stay with it, then you see the growth. And the more growth that you see gives you hope to continue to press on. So the more you go through the suffering, the more you're able to endure suffering as you keep your eyes fixed on Christ. The more you keep your eyes fixed on Christ and you're able to endure, the more character and integrity it presents you with, so that regardless of what type of suffering comes your way, you continue to endure. And the fact that you're able to look back and say, wow, look how the Lord has kept me. Look how I've been able to endure. Look how my character has grown and this fruit is being born in me. I have hope that this has absolutely nothing to do with my effort. This has absolutely nothing to do with any ability within myself. This is a supernatural thing that God is doing in me. Because what person on the face of the earth actually rejoices in suffering? None, except for those with whom the Spirit is producing this. And so we can rejoice in our sufferings. And this is completely opposite. And so this is completely opposite of what we see in the Matthew 13. The person who only wanted the good things that Christ had to offer. They wanted their sins forgiven. They wanted heaven. They wanted blessing. I mean, there are many promises that come with believing. It's not all crosses and suffering. He offers us many promises that He will never leave us or forsake us, promises that we get to have eternal life with Him, promises that He will write His law upon our hearts, promises that He will give us the ability to put sin to death, promises that we will have every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places given to us, promises that we will have a collection of believers who will love us, promises that we will be loved with the same love that God loves the Son. There are many promises to be had. Promises that there will be fruit produced in us. Promises that God will work through us. And this is something that looks good. I mean, isn't that what Simon the sorcerer desired? He saw something that looked good and he wanted that. He desired that. Not so much Christ, but what Christ could produce in someone. But when the difficulty came to those people in Matthew 13, as we've seen it in our own lives, the people that we know personally, people that walked with us, people that prayed with us, people that evangelized with us, people that we said, yes, this is my brother, yes, this is my sister. When the difficulty came, they fled, they ran away, it got too hard, they did not endure. There was no character produced in them. They did not have a hope that would keep them rejoicing in suffering. But those of us who are still here, there is great rejoicing in that, because you can say, look at the assurance that I have of my faith in God, because I'm still here. No matter what has come my way, my feet stand firmly upon the rock that is Christ. And I will not waver, I will not run, I will not jump overboard no matter how hot it gets, because He is my hope. James 1. James 1, verse 2. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. Why? For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Again, we see this same thing. Count it all joy when you meet various trials. I mean, perhaps it's easy to count certain trials joy, but various trials, to rejoice in our sufferings. There's no specific ones allowed and others limited, but all sufferings, all trials, all tribulation, we're to rejoice and count it all joy. But again, when you're in the midst of the crucible, when you're in the midst of the flame, what can you say? How can I count this joy? How can I actually rejoice in this? Think, because enduring through this, remaining steadfast in this, shows that my faith is genuine. That gives me assurance of my salvation. And isn't that a place where the devil immediately attacks? He attacks us in the assurance of our salvation. He attacks us and says, really? Are you really saved? So where do you find assurance? There are many places where you can find assurance. The Bible points you in various places to find assurance, and I submit to you that this is one, and this is a good one. This is a good one that will continually be with you, because continually you're going through suffering. And again, various trials. You know, mothers have different trials than fathers may have. Because a mother who stays with her children deals with the late nights, waking up in the middle of the night, babies crying, you don't have sleep, that may seem not really big to some people, but to the woman who's in it, that's a trial. That's suffering. You are trying to work your job. People on the job are talking about you. You're trying to be a faithful steward of your time. School is difficult. Your parents aren't saved. You're trying to be a good witness. That's a trial. You're driving, you ran out of gas, you're trying to be somewhere it's hot. That's a trial. And again, some people may look at that and say, man, that's nothing. But when you're in the midst of it, there doesn't seem like there's anything more difficult than what you're dealing with. And I think the kindness of God, that He doesn't just say, okay, extreme trials, really major stuff, like when your life is in danger, or when someone is, various trials. Because, it's those little things that will nick you and prick you, and by the end of the day, you find yourself with such a cloud over your head, and you're like, how did I get here? And you look throughout the day and you say, man, I was going through this trial and this trial and this trial all throughout the day. But if we rejoice in them, remembering that this is actually working for my good, enduring this, remaining steadfast, gives me a hope and gives me assurance of my salvation, that though this is painful, Christ is more precious to me. He is truly greater to me than even my own comfort. But you got to let it take its full effect. Isn't that what it says? Let steadfastness have its full effect. Because sometimes you may want to bail. You want to murmur and complain in the midst of the suffering. Murmuring and complaining is not rejoicing. Murmuring and complaining is not counting it all joy. And murmuring and complaining in the midst of the trial, again, for those who truly love God, and you have gone through a suffering, and you have murmured and complained, and the suffering ended, you've never looked back at that murmuring, complaining, and rejoiced that you did that. You've never looked back at the times when you were impatient or you got angry, you lost your temper, you were prideful, you were selfish in the midst of a suffering. Look back at that and say, that was worth it. That produced in me some type of fruit that is looking like Christ. No. In fact, it actually the opposite effect. It actually does more to bring you down and more to make you hang your head, and it brings more shame upon you. That's not letting the suffering work its full effect. It's as the scripture says, do not grow weary in well-doing, for you will reap a harvest in due time if you faint not. There is something that comes if you remain steadfast when it comes to doing good works, as well as when it comes to enduring the suffering. And if you endure the suffering and let it take its full effect, the Bible promises you that it actually gives you a blessing. It gives you a gift, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Because it will produce steadfastness. And test the genuineness of your faith. And that is a comfort. That is a comfort worth having, to know that your faith is genuine. In this age of people falling away, when you read the scripture and you see people falling away, when we've heard the sermons from Hebrews about people falling away and making shipwreck of their faith, isn't it a great treasure to know that your faith is genuine? Isn't it worth it to know my faith is genuine? It is. And the Bible gives us a great gift and a great discerner of how you can know this, that you endure through the suffering, that you count it all joy, that you rejoice. There's more here. Jump down to verse 12. James 1:12. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. For when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life which God has promised to those who love him. Do you see that connection? Those who love him will receive the crown of life. And those who receive the crown of life are those who remain steadfast under trial. And this is the crux of it all. The trial comes. It's painful. This is what we saw in Matthew 13. Christ was not more precious to these people. Their love for Christ did not overwhelm them. And they said, when the suffering came, Christ, goodbye. But for those that love Christ, when the suffering comes, you remain steadfast because you will not sacrifice Christ for anything. So you show your love for him by remaining steadfast, and those who continue to endure to the end, those who continue to rejoice, those who remain steadfast under trial, when they have stood the test, they receive the crown of life at the end because they have shown that they love him. And it's only promised to those who love him. Do you see that connection? The crown of life is promised to those who love him, and those who love him will endure. Those who love him will remain steadfast. And why will they remain steadfast? Because Christ is their treasure. Christ is their passion. Christ is their all and their everything. It's as Paul Washer said, if Christ is going to be anything, he must be what? Everything. He is not an accessory. When your faith is tested, when you go through tribulation and persecution, when you endure hardships and sorrow, and you still remain steadfast, it is a reason to rejoice because it proves your faith is true. Your love for Christ sincere, and your Christianity valid. Yes, sir.
Like when people's faith is shipwrecked, doesn't that mean that they're not going to go to heaven? Possibly.
When someone dies in their sin, there is no hope for them. As long as someone's alive, there's grace. But there is a place where if you continue, especially for those who have been exposed to the truth, especially for those who have tasted, for those who have been in the fellowship, for those who have been in the presence, and they continue in their sin, taking the kindness of God for a license to sin, God may turn such a person over. But until that person's eyes close and they are in their sin, that is not for me to say. So, let's look at some examples of those who have suffered and endured. There are three people within the scripture I would like to look at. And the reason I chose these three is because there's a specific area highlighted that I would like to point out. First, Job, that he lost all this world had to offer. Turn to Job. Job chapter 1, verse 13. Now, there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. If you know something about Scripture, there are no throwaway words. This is here on purpose because it's giving us a foreshadow of what's to come. And there came a messenger to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans fell upon them and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you. I read that and I see my children's names there. I read these things and I don't so much see donkeys and oxen and cattle. I see my stuff. I see my things. I see my home and my car and my clothing and my job and my bank account. And I see my children here. It's easy to read Job and just read it, but you put yourself in that story. Everything that the world has to offer you, riches, possessions, family, even his own health. Chapter 2, verse 7. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took a piece of broken pottery with which to scrape himself while he sat in the ashes. No relief. I don't know if you've ever had a toothache. I've had two at the same time. I could find no relief. No matter what I did, no matter what I took, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't move, I couldn't think. My entire body was consumed with pain, and that was nothing compared to what Job was going through. On top of, he had not even began to mourn for his children and his things, and he is now completely and totally covered in loathsome sores, and the only comfort he could find was a piece of glass that he would scrape himself with as he sat in ashes. This world, this life, has much to offer, and it's not bad. It's not bad to have possessions. It's not bad to have things. It's not bad to have relationships. It's not bad to have health. No, these are things that God is the giver. He gives His people good things and gifts. But if all of that was taken from you, that is a type of suffering. And if all of that is taken from you, is Christ more? Is He enough? Is He your portion? Or is that stuff your portion? If He is your portion, though you endure what Job endured, Job did not curse God. Job did not flee from God. Job had some words that God called him on and checked him on, but he did not forsake God. He did not abandon ship. He remained steadfast. He stayed where he was at, and he said, I want to talk to God. He knew that God was at the end of all of this. He did not... In all of his words, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. He knew it was God who was the orchestrator of all these things, for He is sovereign. So it's one thing to say, well, the devil's the one who did all this stuff, so I'm just angry at the devil. It's another thing to know that God is sovereign. It's another thing to know that God is the one who is working all these things. Your children have just been taken from you, all of them. And to still say, though He slay me, yet will I trust in Him. He is my all and my all. And if I lose everything on this earth, what is it to me, for I have Him? That's one kind of suffering. All can be taken from you. There's another kind of suffering. Let's look at Joseph. Turn to Genesis. Genesis chapter 37. So you may not deal with all being taken from you that this world has, but what if you suffer injustice at the hands of your loved ones and your enemies? This is what Joseph went through. 37:12. Now his brothers, stop. His brothers, not his friends, not his companions, not his servants, his brothers. I have brothers. I have sons. Some of y'all have siblings. Some of you don't, but you have friends that you would consider your brother. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. And he said to him, here I am. So he said to him, go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem, and a man found him wandering in the fields, and the man asked him, what are you seeking? I am seeking my brothers. He said, tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock. And the man said, they have gone away, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers. and found them at Dothan. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers listened to him. So they're ready to kill him. One of the brothers has a good idea and says, "You know what? Let's just throw him down in the pit," because one of the brothers thought it would be a good idea to not participate in this somewhat. He didn't actually stand against his brothers, but he did say, "You know what? Let's just throw him down there," and then he had plans of rescuing him later to bring him to the father. But then Judah stepped up and said, "You know what? Why don't we sell him instead? Because it doesn't really profit us if we kill him. Let's just sell him instead." What did Joseph do to his brothers? He had a dream given to him by God, and he told his brothers. He was treated with injustice. He was treated with unkindness. He was treated with hatred by his loved ones. And perhaps this is what you are dealing with in your suffering. Your very family, your very friends, your very loved ones are the ones who are hurting you. They're the ones who are behind the pain and the suffering. They're the ones whose hands have conspired together to bring harm to you. They're the ones who have sat and thought how they may bring you more pain. With intention. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't, "Oh, I stumbled upon this and we had no choice." They intended, they did this with the intention of bringing harm and bringing pain and bringing suffering. And it was his brothers, his loved ones. And they were behind it. But he did not forsake the Lord. But he did not only suffer at the hand of his loved ones. Because sometimes people say things like, "You know what? My friends, the world treats me better than my own family." I used to hear this all the time when I was teaching high school. And these kids, they always wanted to hang out with their friends, never wanted to be with their families, never wanted to go on family trips or spend any time with their families. All they wanted to do was be on their phone all day with their friends and spend the weekend with their friends. I say, what is it about your family that you hate? So why you hate your family? They don't understand me. My friends, strangers, they're kinder to me than my own family. Well, look how the strangers treated Joseph. Look at chapter 39. Starting with verse 6. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Remember I was telling you about how the Bible doesn't have throwaway. This is a foreshadow of what's about to take place. It's giving you a little, this is important. Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, lie with me. But he refused and said to his master's wife, behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except yourself, because you're his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her to lie beside her or be with her. But one day, when he went into the house, brethren, just a word, beware of that one day. Sexual immorality seeks to have you. Beware of that one day. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and flee sexual immorality, and got out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household and said to them, see, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice, he cried out, and he left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house. Then she laid up his garment by her until his master came home, and she told him the same story, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came in to laugh at me, but as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out of the house. As soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, this is the way your servant treated me, his anger was kindled, and Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners was confined, and he was there in prison. So, the strangers, they didn't treat him much better. This woman, he did the right thing. He did what he was supposed to do, and yet, and you ever think about it? It says one day when the men were not in the house, right? So that means all the rest of the days the men were in the house. Seems that someone would have heard something about her day after day saying, lie with me, right? Other men in there. Someone must have heard this, I'm assuming. She waited until no one else was in there. Why? Because apparently these people had eyes that were seeing what was going on. So she waited until everyone else was gone. But it's interesting. No one ever came to Joseph's defense. Like, you know what, Potiphar, I saw on day after day. Joseph had showed himself to have integrity, and yet no one believed him. And then it goes a step further in chapter 40. For the sake of time, I'm not going to read it, but you can read it on your own. He interprets the dreams of two men. One of them dies. The other one, it's a good dream. He says, just remember me. The guy neglected him. So his family did not treat him right. And then strangers and so-called friends, he was pretty up there with Potiphar. Those two did not treat him right. And those even who he helped, they didn't treat him right. But yet he did not forsake God. In fact, at the end, when his brothers are standing before him, he said those timeless words, what you have meant for evil, God has meant for good. And then Paul. I put him in the category of those who obey God, but their life is still hard. Because many people have been taught falsely that if you obey God, things will go well for you. As long as you just do the right thing, things are going to go really good for you. But then when you look at Paul, and you look at what he endured, beatings, shipwreck, stoning, hunger, constantly in danger from thieves and animals and the elements, and danger from his own people, danger from the Gentiles. His life was filled with suffering. His life was filled with pain. His life was filled with tribulation, literally filled with tribulation. And he died a martyr's death. He suffered up until the very end. And you look at his life and you see faithfulness. You look at his life, you see character. You look at his life, you see integrity. You look at his life, you see dedication. You see sold outness. You see fixed upon Christness. His heart beats after the Lord. For me to live as Christ, to die as gain. That was his mantra. That was his motto. That was his anthem. That was his life. And yet he suffered continually. And some people are going to say, listen, I'm doing the right thing, God. What's going on? Why am I going through all this hardship? I thought that, I'm thinking, look, I'm doing the right thing. Why won't you help me out? Why is everything going bad for me? If that happens, will you endure? Will you be steadfast? Will you continue when it gets tough? Well, we see there was no wavering in their devotion. When the smoke cleared after all the bullets flew, they were still present. So, real quick, I want to read 2 more scriptures for you, and then I want to show you how we can find hope in all of this. 1 Peter 1, 6 through 7. In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials. 1 Peter 1, 6 through 7. So that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Read it again. In this you rejoice. 1 Peter 1, 6 through 7. Though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that, perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So you see there, why? So that the tested genuineness of your faith, and this is what we've been telling you. And then James 5, 10, and 11. As an example of suffering and patience, brothers, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Behold, we consider those blessed who remain steadfast. You have heard of the steadfastness of Job, and this is what we discussed, what I pointed out to you. And you have seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. This was actually considered a blessing. It was considered compassionate and merciful for the Lord to give you these trials to prove the genuineness of your faith. And now I want to have you, with a final parting thought, think on Christ as the example, as the ultimate example. And we talked about Job, who had his possessions taken from him, who gave up all possessions. But think on Christ, the only one who truly gave up all pleasures and possessions. I mean, again, you know the Trinity dwelling in continual joy and bliss, comfort and pleasure and worship and adoration and praise and majesty and glory, and the holy, holy, holy anthems being shouted by the living creatures around the throne, and for Christ to take upon himself willingly flesh, to empty himself, to make himself nothing, taking on the form of a slave, to give up so much the relationships, the comforts. He did this and endured the suffering and remained steadfast, because within ourselves we would not, but He did. He was the only one who in every instance, when all was removed from Him, when all was taken, when all was given up, He remained steadfast to the Lord. You can find hope in Him to do the same. We looked at Joseph, who his loved ones are the very ones who cast him aside, who put their hands to put him to death, who conspired against him, and then even the strangers amongst him are the ones, all relationships put him aside to where he was alone in the prison, though he did nothing and was innocent. Yet Christ was the only one who truly was innocent, and yet He was treated as though He was not. Think on this, that He was punished for the sins of pedophiles and rapists and murderers and liars and the prideful and the racists and the selfish and the homosexuals. He was smitten, stricken, and afflicted as though He committed all the sins of His people. All people put Him aside. His friends, look how the disciples all fled from Him. Look at how those who He did kindness for, how they rejected Him, how they cursed Him, how they mocked Him. Undoubtedly, some of the very ones who He healed, who He fed, who He did kindness for are the very ones who screamed for His blood. Everyone neglected Him. And then, and the most tragic of all, as we heard Sunday, the Father turns His face away. My God, why have You forsaken me? Everyone else did, and now, Father, You too have forsaken me. The only one innocent, the only one. Yes, Joseph is an example, and you may be suffering at the hands of your loved ones, but only Christ endured all that and remained steadfast. He didn't say, you know what, this is too much. Y'all are too much. I've done too much for y'all. I've been too good to y'all. I've been too kind to y'all. This is too much. You know what, this body, I'm done with it. I'm going back. No, He remained steadfast. He endured the suffering, and it is to our benefit. It is talk about rejoice in suffering. We can rejoice in His suffering. We can count it all joy when we look at His various trials, because that has worked for us. And as we think upon that, we can find help to endure our suffering. And then as we look at Paul, who did the right thing and was treated as though he endured suffering, but it was Christ who was the only one who was truly punished, though He did nothing wrong, the only innocent one. As I've heard R.C. Sproul say, there's only been one innocent victim, and He volunteered. That is Christ. So as we learned on Sunday, for those who were here and those who weren't, we look at people who we say, I want to emulate them. But let us look to Christ as the ultimate example, as the ultimate one through whom we may receive the ability to do the very things that we are admiring in Christ, and those who are imitating Christ. Think upon Him, meditate upon Him. It is through the gospel, it is by the Spirit that you will find the very help you need to remain steadfast, so that you may endure, rejoice, receive the character that comes through endurance, through the suffering, and through that character receive the hope as you patiently wait for the coming day when all suffering will be vanquished and we will have eternal peace with the true one who has suffered. questions? Comments? Amen. So again, for those of y'all, again, I don't know what you're going through. You may have gone through great pain, great suffering. I just want to encourage you to remain steadfast in the Lord as you bear these burdens, and you may rejoice that it can give you an assurance of your faith. It can give you the true testing that your faith is genuine. And as you read Matthew 13 and see the stony ground, that when the tribulation and persecution on account of the word came, they fled, you can rejoice as you see, I'm remaining steadfast by the Spirit because of Christ. Father, thank you so much for the one who has suffered. Christ, you suffered, you endured. And by your suffering, we receive the help, we receive the gift, we receive the blessings. Oh, may we meditate upon your suffering. May we find help. May we find hope. May we find the example. Let this mind be in you which was in Christ. Though we are in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking on the form of a slave. Oh God, may we find comfort and hope and help in the example of Christ as we suffer. In Jesus' name, amen.